Chapter 7. Meet the Imperials. Jax came down the stairs from the flight deck to see his guest and temporary crew all lounging in the commons space. Corey, Naomi, and Mr. Ichiko were crammed together on the sofa, with Steve occupying the lone chair. Rudy dropped down the central column and rolled out of the staircase. Jax took in the scene. "Cozy?" Mr. Ichiko looked over. "Captain, your collection of video entertainment is truly phenomenal. You are a connoisseur. So many pre-Empire classics." In Jax's earpiece, Skip said, "I hid the porn." Jax smiled and nodded, knowing the camera pickup in the common room would see him. He said to the others, "Thanks. We spend a fair bit of time in the black, so it helps to have quality and quantity in entertainments." He walked to the small kitchenette and opened the refrigerator. "Beer?" Yeses all around. He returned to the lounge section and distributed the beers. He grabbed one of the chairs belonging to the small dining table and pulled up next to the chair with Steve sitting in it. The two exchanged a look, then tried to not look like they exchanged a look. Jax looked at Corey, who grinned and wiggled her eyebrows. She made a motion toward Naomi that Jax ignored. "So, what are you all watching?" Naomi gestured to the screen. "Something called Fringe. They appear to be a secretive governmental agency that solves mysteries," Ichiko added. "With the help of what appears to be an insane man," Jax smiled. "It was a good show, for 200-odd years ago. It didn't make the cut when the Emperor, then Senator, started his purity nonsense." He turned to look at Steve. "Wouldn't have pegged you for a fan of old-timey vids." Steve looked at Jax. "Plenty you don't know about me." Before Jax could respond, he added, "Our client picked it." Ichiko shrugged. "The oldies are the goodies. I think that's how the saying goes." He grinned. "I never approved of then-Senator Stenson's politics. Such a closed-minded man." He spread his hands. "And here we are." Everyone nodded solemnly. Jax extended his hand toward the large bulkhead-mounted screen. "By all means." The episode of Fringe started playing. 3 days later, Skip woke Jax up 2 hours earlier than he should have. "Jax, get up," the speaker in the ceiling blared. Jax sat bolt upright. What's wrong?" The lights in his quarters raised to daylight levels. "What's going on?" Naomi groaned from the bed. "Imperial patrol, burning hard to intercept," Skip answered. "Same tub as the last time?" "What's going on?" Naomi repeated. "Negative. IFF reads the INV 1203 Resolute, another adjudicator class," Skip answered, still ignoring the woman. "Strong name," Jax said, slipping his pants on and grabbing a Fantastic Seven t-shirt off the chair in the room's corner. He reached for the hatch handle. "Should I wake the others?" the ship's SI asked. "What the hell is going on?" Naomi shouted, getting out of Jax's bed. He turned to her. "Were you not listening? Imperial patrol." He opened the door and left his quarters. He walked past the berth next to his, where Mr. Ichiko was bunking, and kept walking. He neared the door to the berth he'd given to both Steve Delfino and Corey. He banged a fist on the door. He heard a series of shouts and groans and grinned. "Yeah, go ahead and gently wake our client," he said as he reached the staircase. Naomi stepped out of Jax's quarters, slipping a sneaker on. She looked at his bare feet. Rudy popped up from the deck below. Jax stopped on the staircase. "What were you up to?" The droid continued up toward the flight deck. "I was taking a nap." Jax reached the flight deck and immediately saw a blinking red indicator. He sat down and tapped the control. "This is Jeb Bartlett, captain of the Joey Lucas. How can I help you?" A nasal voice replied. "You can power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Jax affected his most innocent-sounding voice. "Oh, is there something wrong, Resolute?" "Transmitting your docking vector now. Autoflight will take over at 5,000 kilometers. You'll surrender weapons control then. Resolute out." The massive shape of the sideways mushroom cap of the Imperial ship was visible now to the naked eye. The massive name stenciled in 10-meter-tall letters, Resolute. Naomi, Steve, Ichiko, and Corey crowded out of the staircase. The Japanese man asked, "What's going on? Your ship said the Imperials were harassing us?" He looked past Jax at the now even larger Resolute. "Oh, I see." The man looked around. "I don't think I need to tell you all that our mission should not be shared with the Imperials." Everyone nodded. "Also, if we can arrange it, it'd be better if they didn't see me." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Why is that?" "Long story. One I'm happy to tell when we're safely on our way away from that Imperial monstrosity." Routine stops. The INV 1203 Resolute drifted past the Osprey, the smaller ship dwarfed by the massive cruiser. Jax and the others were down in the cargo hold, while Skip handled flight ops until the Imperial vessel took over flight control to bring the Osprey in. The docking vector provided took them past the massive mushroom cap forward section and to a small hangar on the main body of the ship. "This doesn't look very comfortable," Mr. Ichiko complained, as he lowered himself down the ladder into the small weapons module on the underside of the infiltrator. While Valerian co-op infiltrators had several weapons types at their disposal, the underbelly-mounted particle beam cannon was their most powerful. The particle beam weapon system was self-contained in the lower section of the ship, under the cargo bay. It was not much more than a crawl space, but thanks to the exotic matter conditioner and other highly energetic components, there wasn't a sensor around that would pick out a single biosign in that area of the ship. Jax shrugged. "That or chat with the Imperials." The older man descended the ladder. He looked up. "See you soon. Be safe." He waved as the rungs folded flat against the wall, and a hatch slipped over the accessway. Jax turned to Rudy and Baxter. "They'll scan you two, then expect you to hang around the ship. So depending on how long this takes, you may need to slip him some food or water." The matte black combat droid turned his mostly featureless face toward Jax and the others. "We got this, boss. He'll be fine." His optic receptor had a red scatter light that swished side to side. Naomi asked, "Where did you get a combat droid anyway?" "His parents," Corey offered before Jax could answer. He turned and glared at her. "What? Was it a secret?" Jax was about to answer when Skip announced, "Entering the Resolute's bay now. Touchdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Osprey lurched slightly as she came to a rest on the deck of one of the Resolute's landing bays. "Let's meet our friends." He moved to stand more in the center of the hold. He turned to the others. "Remember the cover story?" Everyone nodded, though Steve didn't look happy about the agreed-upon story. Several clunks and whirs announced the lowering of the boarding ramp. Baxter moved to stand in the hold's corner. The sound of heavy boots boarding the ship echoed. It didn't take more than a few seconds for the first Imperial shock trooper to come up the spiral staircase and stand in the hold facing Jax and the others. 3 more troops emerged from the stairs to be followed by the ship's sub-commander. She was in her mid-40s, her crimson-colored uniform stiff enough that it likely stood on its own when she went to bed at night. The woman walked up to Jax, looking him up and down before saying, "You're the captain of this ship?" She glanced at Baxter, raising an eyebrow, but said nothing. Imperials looked down on droids and the humans who associated with them. Jax nodded. "That's me, Jeb Bartlett." He tried his best to plaster his most winning smile on his face. "How can we be of service to the Empire?" The woman tutted. "You can stay out of the way while my scanner crew goes over your ship. Where are you headed?" Corey coughed. We were headed for York." She pointed at Steve and Naomi. "It's their honeymoon." Jax nodded. The two tried their best to look equal parts innocent and in love with each other. Steve looked slightly more uncomfortable than Naomi. The sub-commander walked over to the 2 fake newlyweds, eyeing each of them in turn. She turned to Corey. "And you are?" Corey reached for Jax's hand. "I'm his girlfriend." She pointed to Baxter, then Rudy. "We do odd jobs when in port. The droids help." Jax smiled. "Sub-commander—" "Pet it," the woman offered. Jax nodded. Sub-Commander Pettit, have we done anything wrong? She motioned to two of her shock troops. Escort them off the ship. Sub-Commander? Jack said, his voice higher, more urgent. Pettit spun to face Jax. You've done nothing wrong. That we know of, Captain Bartlett. If you comply, this will take very little time, and you can be on your way. She motioned to her troops. She looked over at Baxter. Do we need to worry about that thing? Jax replied. No, he's inactive right now. He looked at Rudy, who had been sitting near the staircase, doing his best to be unnoticed. Stay out of their way. Be helpful. The droid made a series of random beeps and whistles in response. The bright light of civilization. The crew of the Osprey was shown to a small lounge area off the docking bay, where they could wait for the search of the Osprey to be completed. Jax walked over to a window where he could see the Osprey and a few other craft, all Imperial. Hate these assholes, he growled. Corey grunted. The long arm of civilization keeps getting longer. She looked around, squinting. They've been getting harder and harder to avoid. Steve nodded. Yeah, we had to dump cargo 3 weeks ago out near Valhalla. They seem to perch at wormhole transfers, all over the outer edge these days. He shook his head. Bastards cost us on that one. That's why Marshall had to stick to the job we booked. Jax turned. Wait, wasn't that... Steve looked at him straight-faced. Like I said, I wasn't lying. He turned and stalked to a vending machine set in the room's corner. Any of you have Imperial credits on you? Naomi reached into a pocket on her jumpsuit and walked over. Cap? Rudy said over Jax's earpiece. Jax looked around, then walked over to where Steve and Naomi were examining the vending machine. Catching Corey's eye, he nodded toward the machine and brushed his ear. She nodded, then turned and joined them at the machine. She nudged Naomi, nodding toward Jax as both of them moved to stand between Jax and where they were pretty sure a camera was mounted. What's up? He asked in a whisper, turning to make sure it looked like he was looking at a selection of fried vegetable snacks next to Steve. While their comms were low-powered, meant for close range and heavily encrypted, it was still risky to talk for too long, especially inside an Imperial ship. I'm worried they'll find the vault, the droid replied. Jax tapped his chin. See if you can distract them, but if they do, they do. There's nothing in there right now that would cause too big a problem. He reached up to tap his ear, then paused. Don't forget to feed the cat. He tapped his earpiece. He looked at Naomi and Corey, nodding. He looked to Steve next to him. Split a bag of pickle wrinkles? Naomi nudged Corey. What was that all about? You'll have to ask your boyfriend. She winked. Rudy did his best to silently follow the scanning team as they wandered around the Osprey. The sub-commander had left the ship shortly after Jax and the others. The scanner crew dutifully ignored Rudy while he tried to accidentally get in their way, beeping and whistling his apologies. The upside of being a droid, even an older model, was that he could hold a conversation over encrypted comms while still moving through the ship, politely harassing the team of Imperials. Hey, droid! Someone shouted. Rudy spun his head in a full circle, beeping politely. Come up here, the voice said, this time from the deck above, the sound passing through the open spiral staircase. Skip, can you come up with something to keep them from the vault? Rudy sent over the ship's wireless network. I will do what I can, the ship's SI replied. Rudy rolled towards the stairs. He beeped and whistled, hoping that the shock troops got, "Excuse me, coming through, please get out of my way," out of the sounds. When one of the scanner techs ignored him, he reached up and pinched the man on the butt. With a yelp of surprise, the roadblock removed itself. When he reached the common deck, he looked around. Over here, a woman shouted. She waved to him from the end of the hallway that led to the berths. One of these is locked. Rudy followed over, and the scanner tech pointed to the door to Mr. Ichiko's assigned berth. He made a series of beeps and whistles. How odd. Please wait a moment. He added a few bonk sounds for emphasis. Open it now, the woman insisted. Rudy made a show of fumbling for pockets his body didn't possess before reaching up to the announcer pad. Knowing that Skip was watching, he pressed the button, then pushed the hatch open. He spun his head to look at the woman. When she said nothing, he beeped, "You are welcome." From below, the sounds of shouting echoed up. Rudy turned for the stairs but was shoved aside as the woman he'd just helped pushed him out of the way. By the time he got back down to the hold, it was obvious what the commotion was. Fire suppression foam was all over the place. Skip said, "Sorry, I'm not good at distractions on short notice. I made it seem like the guy in the armory tripped something, then shot foam everywhere." Rudy watched two scanner techs leave the armory, wiping foam off their uniforms. "I think it worked, though," Rudy replied. "Who's cleaning this up?" "Fucking Imperial dickheads!" Jax fumed as he flung his hand hard enough to dislodge fire suppression foam from his hand to splat against the bulkhead. Steve walked over to the access hatch leading to the particle beam cannon equipment crawl space. Jax walked to the staircase. "I'll get us underway." He pointed to the armory hatch. "Guess what you all are doing?" He didn't wait to hear their replies, heading up to the common deck as quickly as he could. As he dropped into the pilot's console, he asked, "Skip, we ready?" The Imperials found nothing that would have given them cause to keep Jax and the others in custody, much to Sub-Commander Pettit's displeasure, from what Jax could tell. When her scanner team, as far as they knew, accidentally caused the fire suppression system to activate, she ordered the search cut short. "Yep, they're insisting on autoflight out to 5,000, but we're cleared to go. I got the sense they were eager to see us leave." Jax powered up the grav lift motors, lifting the Osprey off its landing gear. With the expected clunks, the gear retracted into the ship. Jax spun the ship around to face the large hangar doors. He looked down at the blinking indicator and sighed as he pressed the control. The flight controls slid away from him as the ship left the docking bay under the control of an Imperial flight controller somewhere in the massive warship. Watching the controls make adjustments, Jax growled. "I hate auto-flight." "Try being me," Skip replied. "Someone is controlling my physical body from a distance. It is disconcerting." A few minutes later, the flight controls moved back into position, nearly knocking Jax over. He tapped the intercom button. "We're flying free. Wormhole in 5. On the small display showing the rear camera view, he watched as the Imperial ship receded. He knew the ship would track them as long as they were in sensor range. The type of ship the Osprey was, how many were aboard her transponder ID, and likely a lot more metadata would be logged and sent back to New Terra to be logged in a massive database. "Wormhole in 1 minute," Jax announced on the ship-wide intercom. He looked over his shoulder. "Everything dialed in?" Rudy made his nodding gesture, metal fist bobbing up and down at the wrist twice. A countdown on Jax's console reached 5. 4, 3, 2, 1, he said, then pushed a blinking blue button. Outside the cockpit, a vortex of blue and green swirling gases spiraled open. Lightning like electrical discharge danced around the event horizon. The Osprey leaped into the vortex, and in a blink, the swirling energy collapsed, leaving no trace that anything had been there. The interior of the wormhole was a twisting tunnel of the same blue and green energy. The flight controls retracted from Jax's pilot seat into the console. He turned. "How long?" Rudy wheeled away from his console. 2 days, he paused, then added. 3 course changes along the way. Jax went down to the commons deck to see everyone sitting around the lounge. "Done with the de-foaming?" he asked, grinning. "If I never see fire suppression foam again, it'll be too soon," Naomi groaned, reaching up to wipe a glob from her hair. Jax headed for the kitchenette. "We've got 2 days to kill. Who's hungry?" Corey nudged Steve in the ribs. She coughed and said, "Stevie makes a killer lasagna if you've got the ingredients." The younger Delfino brother glared at his sibling's love interest, who smiled and made a go-on motion. From the kitchenette, Jack said, Yeah, I think we do, actually. I'm game." He paused, trying to compose himself. If you are? When Steve nodded, Jax extended a hand toward the various cupboards. Steve got up and moved over to the kitchen area to help Jax. Mr. Ichiko looked at Naomi and Corey, eyebrow raised. Corey chuckled and glanced at Naomi. Rumor is they hooked up a few weeks ago. Stevie won't tell me anything, but I know they got in a fight, and Stevie decked Jax before he and his brother shipped out on their last job. The other man leaned back, exhaling. I see. I had wondered what the tension was about. He shook his head. Young people, so wasteful of time. He smiled. I guess I am the only one on this ship to have not slept with our captain. He turned in his seat to watch the two 20-somethings prepare dinner for the others, missing Naomi's pantomimed choking gesture. He turned back to the other two. Well, maybe they'll figure it out while we're in wormhole transit. He pointed to the screen. More fringe? Transit. The next morning, Jax eased out of his quarters as quietly as he could, so as not to wake Naomi. Hey, Skip, he whispered, looking at the ceiling as he padded into the common deck lounge. Yeah, boss. What's on the to-do list? He pressed a few buttons on the coffee maker and smiled warmly as the familiar clunks and whistles sounded, announcing that the brewing process had started. Even though it wasn't real coffee, it did the job and smelled good. The biological system needs some love. Our trip to Mariposa, and now all of you are doing a number on it. The coffee maker dinged. Jax pulled a mug from the cupboard. Anything less, gross? There was a pause as the ship's SI scanned the substantial list of things that needed doing. Lots, but depending on how long this job lasts, you really should look into the biologicals. Another pause. Sorry. Jax sipped his coffee. Wonder if I can make Naomi do it. He shook his head. I guess it's my responsibility. He moved to the staircase. In the quarters that Steve and Corey were sharing, Skip said, You're clear. He's down in engineering. Thank God, Steve said, standing. He was going to try to get us to clean the shit tank, wasn't he? He actually debated making Naomi do it, the SI replied, and then realized his slip-up. I'm sure he was joking. Girlfriend and all. The sex. Corey ran a hand down her face. Thanks, Skip. That'll do. She looked at Steve. Coffee and an ass-kicking? Steve grinned as he opened the hatch. Mario Kart 2099? She nodded. You know it. The biological systems for the Valerian co-op infiltrator were tucked in along the port and starboard sides of the ship, accessed from the engineering space. With space at a premium, especially on smaller craft like the Osprey, the biological systems were tightly integrated and operated at high levels of efficiency. Jax removed a gloved hand from an access panel and examined it. We need a bot for this. That's pretty offensive, Baxter said from the opposite side of engineering, where his charging cradle was situated. Jax held up the gloved hand. This is shit. Shit from 4 people. Not to mention the way too many we rescued from Mariposa. He made a face as he peeled the glove off so that it was wrong side out. He dropped it into a recycler and grabbed a fresh pair. Before slipping both on, he sipped his coffee. Give me some work music at least. Skip obliged by playing some oldies from the overhead speakers in the relatively large engineering area. Jax reached into the access panel again, this time with both hands. Somewhere inside that particular piece of equipment was a high-powered impeller meant to churn the tank, pulverizing any chunks. When the tank reached a certain fill level, the slurry was sucked down into another chamber where it was exposed to vacuum, in order to form it into a frozen cube. Said cube would then be jettisoned. Jax dry heaved, while holding his head back away from the opening, looking up and away from his work. So gross. Mr. Ichiko was the last to rise. He found Steve and Corey still on the sofa, engaged in the cartoonish race of their lives. Naomi was sitting at the small cafe table, reading something from a data tablet, a cup of coffee steaming next to her. Good morning, my friends, the jovial Japanese man said as he moved to the coffee maker. Naomi looked up. "Good morning," she smiled. "Hey," Steve and Corey said in unison, their eyes never leaving the main display and the game on it. "Where is our captain this morning?" Steve snickered, and Skip answered, "The captain is down in engineering, making repairs to the biological systems." The older man made a face, scrunching his forehead. "Oh, that doesn't sound fun." "Possibly the worst job on a ship," Steve said, as he leaned to the right as his cart, driven by a mushroom man, drifted off the course slightly. "Damn it!" "Ha!" Corey shouted as her cart, driven by a woman in a pink dress, roared past. Hours later, Jax walked up the staircase. "You all need to get more fiber." Steve looked at him. "Man, you need to shower, now." "You reek," Corey agreed. Mr. Ichiko nodded. "You do indeed stink, Captain." He held up a pot, steam wafting off it. "I am preparing lunch. It will be ready when you are showered."